How should Christians think about artificial intelligence? Should we be hesitant to embrace attempts to replicate human cognitive functions in machines?
It's Joshua Smith here, host of the Dolores Project. Before we get into the season, I wanted to frame out some different conversations that I've experienced both as an author, researcher on the topics of AI and technology, but also some of the issues I've faced as a theologian stepping into some of these spaces. So I'm going to share a couple of videos here to kind of explore what I'm talking about when I say issues, as far as what I've faced, and even being invited onto some pretty big podcasts to talk about these things. But then when I try to talk about things with a nuanced viewpoint and to make concessions for different technologies like robotics and AI, things that literally saturate every being of our society and or saturate everything in our society. So like, how do we talk about those things and how do we engage them when we don't want to listen to people who are authorities on the subject? So I'll give you an example. If you're just looking in the theological sphere of people who've written on AI and robotics, what you'll find a lot more times than not are people in lay positions, either pastorally or maybe they're into apologetics, and people ask them about AI and what they should be concerned about. And I think in many times their concerns are valid and they mean well, but the way that we frame this whole conversation can be very unhelpful to actual engagement within the community, developing an ethics of AI and technology, because we really kind of miss the forest for the trees. That's what I mean by that. Well, let's take, for example, here with this discussion with Sean McDowell and Scott Ray, two people who I respect and admire. When they had a conversation about artificial intelligence, they focused on the issue of consciousness.
Artificial intelligence and robotics are becoming a part of our everyday lives, whether we realize it or not, whether we like it or not. Are robots and artificial intelligence ever going to gain consciousness like human beings and be able to think? And perhaps most importantly, how should we think biblically about artificial intelligence and robotics?
And I had a conversation with Sean and Scott that was not published, but to talk about my book, Robot Theology, where I kind of delve into some of these issues, robot rights.
Let's jump to what's been called the robot rights movement.
Personhood, racism and bias in robots, a whole lot of nuanced things in those discussions. And what I typically find is we want to quickly go to consciousness. Is it conscious? That's really not the broader question of what's happening in this discussion. Really what the discussion about is theology. The discussion is about whether or not we can bring and usher in a utopia or whether or not this is going to bring about a dystopia. And all of that is framed by a theological narrative. And so it's not really an issue of metaphysics, which sometimes you'll hear philosophers make it out to be, but it's really not. You know, we believe in a lot of things as Christians that allow metaphysically for things to happen that are not natural or that are not something that we've observed in the modern world. And that's perfectly fine. But when it comes to robots and AI, we tend to be pretty hardcore fundamentalist and without empirical reason to be. And so that's what I mean when we're framing the issue improperly and how that's stunting our engagement with it. And so now because of ChatGPT and because of other things that have popped up, all of a sudden we're concerned. But really, this is a much broader conversation that's been happening, I would say, even going back to the 1600s with the discovery of magnetism and the concern about healing through magnets and kind of this whole general worldview that's actually taking place at the same time, that the church is dealing with all these tensions with this shift in the nature of philosophy. So why do we leave that out? Why don't we leave out that the scholastics had this view that we could usher in the utopia and the eschaton by using technology? Why do we leave that out? Well, I think if we're honest sometimes, and this just is my experience with people who have bigger podcasts and with bigger platforms, is that we don't actually want to have a conversation about these issues. What we want to do is promote our particular narrative of what we think technology can do versus what actually is happening, what deception is within the technology, because that's what AI is. I hate to tell you that, but it's about this banal deception, and that's why we use it, and that's why we enjoy it. It's not because it's manipulating us in some ways, but it kind of is, but because it is kind of like magic, and it is kind of a shortcut in many ways. And so you'll hear a couple different things framed in these conversations. I think they're very unhelpful. One of the unhelpful framings is this: yeah, but it's not human. Oh man, if I had a dollar every time I heard that. Nobody is saying that it's human. I don't know of any scholar in the robot rights literature, in the robot rights movement, for or against, who is saying that a machine is a human. Even though our materialistic worldview kind of says that a man is a machine, or human is a machine. I don't believe that, but that's kind of what the whole modern world is built around, that idea, and even how we think about the mind as a computer and the eye as a camera. Like, all those are terrible analogies, right? That's not what it is. But those narratives, as Wittgenstein says, sometimes we get trapped in the web of those images. I think Christians have fallen into that as well, and many theologians have fallen into that as well. And it's an issue of fear, right? An issue of driving content engagement. And I think it's very dishonest. So those are some of my concerns about how Christians are engaging in this circle, and in really how they're highlighting particular narratives over others. And yes, that is to me and many others, but hey, that's just kind of where we are. But if you want to have legitimate, nuanced conversations about these topics and hear from scholars, I invite you to engage with the content here on the Dolores Project, to reach out, to comment, to support the work that these authors are doing, because it is an important work and it is a marginalized work. But we're talking about things that determine our whole livelihood. You know, your resume is going to get passed through a machine before it sees a human. You know, there's all types of automation happening in warehouses. You probably will work with a machine at some point in your life, or either you're already working with one right now. Your company's going to go through issues of how to deal with AI ethics. Your company's going to try to figure out how to wrestle with those tensions between remote work and the integration of AI to boost their capital, right? Because that's what AI is about. AI is about capitalism, and it is about materialism and all those things. So we really deceive ourselves if we think that it's really just about a philosophical experiment of trying to make a machine think like a human. That's not quite what the question is about. And I think another part of the issue that not a lot of people are talking about is the military funding behind AI. And so as you explore just the history of DARPA, this research agency that's, that works with the military, that works with civilian scientists and researchers to bring about these avenues of, one, how do we make technology for Department of Defense, for military applications, but also with consumer applications in mind. So this dual usage avenue of research is why we have these technologies that we have today. It's why we have the ability to make videos, and why we have the ability to communicate with people across the world in an instant. It's because it's about technological advancement for the sake of security. And that's another thing that I find suspiciously absent from this conversation, especially from Christian viewpoints. And you'll not hear many people talk about that, talk about DARPA and talk about how we're using these applications and these AI models already in defense applications that are very ethically problematic. There's one called Bugsplat. And Bugsplat is basically a mathematic model that allows an individual to say, hey, the collateral damage for this strike, drone strike, whatever kind of strike it is less than this percentage. So it meets the requirement. And so, I mean, just think about that. Based on a mathematical model, we're saying it's okay to take life. And I mean, are we okay with that as a society? Are we okay with that? Are you okay with it? I guess that we are, because we're not talking about it. But these are some of the issues that we're going to explore. And there's so many other things too about AI and pornography, sexuality, AI and bias and privacy, and all of those different issues. And it's so much bigger than, will AI take my job? Will AI become conscious? It's so much bigger than that, my friend. So if these are questions that concern you, issues that bother you, join me on this project and let me know what your thoughts are, what you would like to see addressed. And we have a bunch of wonderful guests coming on to talk about these issues from their unique scholarship. And I'm just so excited to share some of this content with you. All right, take care, and I'll see you next time.